Thank you for being a lovely audience. Let's move on to our next session. Over the next 30 minutes, we now want to talk about how can you secure success, a deep dive into data privacy, cost optimization, and security strategies for startups. We have a stellar panel lined up. Let me not take any more time. This session is powered by NetApp. We'd like to thank them for their continuous support. Let me introduce our esteemed panelists. Vivek Vaidya, founding partner, Superset; Gautam Jain, software director, NetApp; Yoginder Pal Manchanda, Executive VP, Binary Semantics; Vikas Verma, Senior DGM, Enterprise Business Group, Tally Solutions; and the chair of this very insightful panel, Bhanu Chopra, founder and chairman at RateGain IT Solutions. Let's give it up for the panel. Bhanu, the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much. So very critical topics of discussion around data privacy and cybersecurity. Because I can tell you as startups, as you go on to build your companies and you think about getting customers and getting investors, a lot of the good work can be undone if these two important topics are not taken care of. Being a listed company, I can tell you, this is by far the number one risk that I think about, as we continue to build the company. In fact, we focus on travel and hospitality, and when we ask the CTOs of these large companies what's the number one risk that they think about that keeps them up at night, and it's often cybersecurity that comes up. So I'm very pleased to have such a great panel with me. And what I would do is I would like to invite them all to sort of talk about their organizations and how they are helping in these areas of data privacy and cybersecurity. So Vivek, we can start with you.
Sure, thank you, Bhanu. My name is Vivek Vaidya. I'm one of the founders of a startup studio called Superset, which is based in San Francisco. I am also, as part of the studio, I'm the CTO of a company called, founder and CTO of a company called Catch, which is a programmatic privacy platform for privacy compliance across all privacy regulations all over the world. Prior to this, I was the CTO of Salesforce Marketing Cloud. Came to Salesforce through the acquisition of my company called Crux, which is a data management platform, and we dealt with GDPR and CCPA, CPRA, basically privacy regulations all over the world. So that's, to Bhanu's point, we build software that helps companies comply with privacy regulations. I've been on the other side, having had to comply with regulations. So a lot of scar tissue. Some of it is still hasn't worn off from my experience at Salesforce. So, Gautam?
Hi, I'm Gautam Jain, director at NetApp. Spent the last 25 years building startups to working in enterprises, working with OEMs, partners, building businesses, and spend most of my career actually building data protection and security products.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I am Yoginder Manchanda. I have over 30 years plus experience. With over 2 decades, I'm with Binary Semantics Limited, a Gurgaon-based company. I'm more of a techno-functional guy. So at Binary Semantics, we have typically 3 platform-based solutions to be offered as a in-premise as well as SaaS-based solutions in the area of BFSI, compliance, insurtech, and vehicle telematics. I think we as a company develop, support the solution and provide associated services. And since our solution being more of B2B, B2B2C, so data privacy is an important aspect for us to consider and deliver to our customers. So I think that's where we'll delve more in the coming talks. Over to you.
Hi everyone, myself Vikas. I'm from Tally Solutions. I believe most of you know about Tally. And I'm working with Tally since last 20 years. I worked across all the geography of India and helping businesses, be it small, be it enterprise, for their business growth journey. And also to helping them adopting technology across. So I have a lot of experience and I feel privileged to be here with you all. I think whatever I'm going to talk here, it will definitely give some deep insight on that. Thanks to my all co-panelist friends. I feel privileged with you all. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, guys. So, Vivek, I'll start with you. When we talk about regulatory compliance, I think it's a fairly important topic, especially for companies that are actually going abroad as well. A company like RateGain, we've also faced challenges around how to comply with GDPR. I was actually surprised to learn that in Europe, for instance, if you have employees there, you actually can't even share that information back to your HQ, which is India. So would love for you to give some insights on, for startups here, from a regulatory perspective, what to do in India, and if you're going abroad, what to consider.
Yeah, look, one of the things that I've observed with the Indian startup ecosystem is that by and large, and I'm generalizing here a little bit, but by and large, startups fall into two categories. One, you're either building for the Indian market, so you're either a B2C startup or a fintech startup that primarily has, or rather exclusively has, customers who are Indian citizens. So you're building for the Indian market. The second category of startups, you're a startup that is building in India, but your go-to-market is the world. So you could be and Freshworks is the darling. It's the best example of this, where they're built in India, but they have customers all over the world. So if you are in that first category, then you have to comply with various privacy regulations or whatever other regulations that the Indian government requires you to comply with. DPDB, which is the Data Protection Bill, I forget what the second D stands for, is about to come out. It's not formal law yet, but whenever that comes out, whatever the regulation is, startups here will have to comply with that. Typically, those rules are anchored around how you collect data, what kind of choices you give to the consumers whose data you're collecting, on how the data is used or not used, and what rights do they have, to Bhanu's point about whether it's data residency, data movement, the right to delete, right to access, all of these things. You have to implement that as part of complying with that Indian privacy regulation. Now, if you are a startup that is building for the global market, so you're a B2B startup and you have customers all over the world, now you are processing data for citizens who are not Indian citizens, but could be citizens of Europe, or various countries in Europe, or the US, or wherever else. So in that case, you have to comply with the regulations of those countries. US is unique in that every state, there are 12 states now in the US out of the 50 that have come up with their own privacy regulation. So it becomes a challenge, as Bhanu was pointing out, like understanding what to do in what situation is hard for a startup. So recognizing what your markets are, being very intentional about where you want to play and what kind of infrastructure you want to build when it comes to the collection, processing, analysis, movement of data is paramount as you build and scale your startup.
So Vivek, I have a couple of follow-ups. So when you talk about startups that are actually trying to build for the world, when you're actually processing data and you're processing it for customers across different continents and different countries, when you're on the cloud, is there regulation that you need to be in that country like we have it in India? And similarly, if you can talk about for the startups here, what are like the basic minimums and how do they get access to that information, so that they're compliant?
It's a great question, Bhanu. So I'll give you a very real example. So I mentioned Catch, which is one of the companies where I'm the CTO. We just signed on a big brand as a customer. And that brand, which is a US brand, they're launching a loyalty program in Europe. And we, being a US-based company, all of our infrastructure is run out of AWS in the US. We're in US East and US West, right? But so this brand, because they're launching in Europe and they're going to be servicing European customers only, one of their requirements was that our infrastructure had to work out of a European data center. So we had to move or clone our infrastructure to run out of AWS Frankfurt. right? So so European, the GDPR is notorious for this. You cannot move data out of Europe. You have to be in that country, and you have to provide whatever rights the citizen of that country has to your customers. So yeah, that becomes a tricky thing.
So I also, given a lot of the audience here are startups, I also wanted to get the panelists' advice on how do they actually allocate resources, because I'll share with you at our company, maybe because of the scale that we actually have a dedicated data protection officer, right? But here, startups, they're always struggling for resources. So I would like to get your advice on where can they go find resources that can actually help them guide through this whole process. So maybe Gautam and Yoginder, you guys can comment on this.
Sure. Yeah. Great topic. Thanks, Vivek, for talking about privacy and compliance. So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about security. Something that we as startups don't think consciously, and having experienced building a startup, you don't quite think of security as a decelerator. But based on experience, what I can tell you is it's important to take a structured approach at some point of time in your journey as you're building the startup, because the last thing you want is the security posture of the code that you write and what you ship that is running as a SaaS service in the cloud to be breached, right? We all know the implications of being breached, held ransomware, and it's important to protect yourself. So you talked about resources, right? Where do you get resources? I mean, one of the things that every startup, when you talk to, well, I'm short on resources, right? In terms of manpower. Technology is great. There are tools available that you can actually go ahead and deploy. Especially nowadays, startups have started using ChatGPT to generate code. Now just imagine how vulnerable your code is. And the last thing you want that to be a decelerator. To take a structured approach, you don't have to necessarily put a lot of process around it, but proactively take a structured approach, use the tools to identify vulnerabilities in the code and ship it, so that at some point of time when you reach the growth stage, a VC comes in, they want to audit. No VC wants to invest in a company that's not secure or has been breached before. So it's extremely critical and important for your next round or your pre-seed to make sure that you have not been breached. So take a structured approach, start small, and make sure that what you are building and shipping is secure, free of vulnerability in this very dynamic cloud environment, which is actually ever-changing.
So Gautam, I have a follow-up. You talked about tools. I know at RateGain we use CrowdStrike and Palo Alto, but can you maybe list a couple of tools that are out there that startups can look to employ?
So for example, for identifying vulnerabilities in your code, you can use tools like Rapid7. Just run right across for your code, or Black Duck, just to identify all the vulnerabilities that are inherent in the default templates and the EC2 instances that you get from the cloud. So you eliminate all those vulnerabilities right at the onset. And there are plenty of tools available. You don't have to invest a lot of resources.
For the startups who perhaps may not have the money to buy these tools, one thing, you mentioned code, right? Vulnerabilities in code that exist. So GitHub has if you're using GitHub as your source code control system, you can run Dependabot that's natively integrated into GitHub, and it's part of your GitHub subscription, and you get a daily or weekly, whatever frequency you want to set it up on all of your repositories. You'll get a report of all of the security vulnerabilities, categorized by low, medium, high, and you can then decide when you want to fix them.
And just to make sure to follow up, thanks for bringing that up, Dependabot will tell you where the issue is. But if you don't have a structured approach, you will ignore it. You will ship the code because you are in a hurry to get to market first. So take a structured approach and use the automated tools. Thank you, Vivek.
Yoginder, would you like to come in?
Yeah, definitely. I would like to add to what tools they said. I think other tool which open source, which can be used for vulnerabilities is app. I think that's one very good tool, even we have found. And just adding to what my colleague said, one thing is in terms of resource, it's not only infrastructure or the things you built. I think more than that, most important is the changing the mindset of the people who are working on that startup. That's really important. I think that starts from top, goes to bottom. I think that's where typically when all the startups are developing some solution, so instead of doing normal coding, these days people follow DevOps. There's one more thing, DevSecOps. I think that's where you can use, I think, security aspects to build in the code from day one so that there are least chances that you falter on that code. So other than physical infra things, I will lay more stress on processes to be followed and practices to be followed. That's what at the end give you a solid and robust product which can definitely last long.
Actually, Manu, just one quick thing. You mentioned DPO, right? Uh, if you're a small startup, sometimes you as the CTO of the startup or the CEO of the startup may be the DPO. I mentioned Catch. I am the data protection officer at Catch.
That's great. So I actually want to pick up something that Yoginder you said about changing mindsets and really building the culture. So I want to pick up on that topic because I think it's very, very important to educate the employees as well about the importance and what are the kind of things that you can do. For instance, I know at RateGain we actually do mock tests, mock drills as well, where we actually induce phishing, right? So I'd love to hear from Vikas as well, and Yoginder, maybe you can start on things that you have seen happen in terms of building that culture, from top down.
Sure. I think building culture is really important. I think that's what enable every person in that company to really develop strong and secure solutions. Culture, again, as I said, starts from top. And that's where one has to really, the clarity of thought, what do you really want to develop and build? I think then you have to involve all the people concerned who are part of development process. I think that's where you can build. And not only enforce them, just make them participate into it. Let them understand the importance of it. I think that's how involving more people, creating forum within your company, rewarding people who are doing good job on security front. So these are the small things which really do with your team members who are part of development project. I think that's what really helps change the culture of the company for developing a solid and secure product.
That's a great question, and I believe that every small startup or a big company, they also have a concern on the data security and all. And if you just think about Tally, Tally is working last more than 3 decades. That businesses, even it is a small business or a big business, they have to think of about the business and that growth and not about the data security and so on and so forth. This should be very, very simple, very intuitive. So based on that, Tally is given that empowerment to any business. I'm just talk about the culture in the business and the hygiene, and then coming on the other side of that way. So Tally believes that there is a business happening around. Now, if there is something happening within the data and the Tally have to be very strong in that to address that kind of thing, and very smart way to actually encounter that kind of a situation, so that any business should not think of that my data will go off and then what do I do. So that is one thing. Taking all the complexity in and empowering the business that they have to focus on the business side, not in terms of the data security on. Tally is taking care about that, as my friend said, that there should be some application required. So Tally is taking care of that thing. It is a on-premises license. Data stays with you, but even though if there is some interruption happen, it is very smart application which will give you in a second or in a moment to recover the data, and you can start doing your business. Now, after COVID, there is a lot of requirement going on cloud, accessing from remote as well. So it is in the encrypted form. So whenever data is traveling from X place to Y place, it is encrypted, it is very much secured, and it will definitely give you the real form of business data accuracy and all. So that way, that culture we are building, and we are empowering to the businesses So they should not feel that there is so much complexity and I have to actually take care about the data security. Everything is taken care about Tally, and they have to just think of for their business growth.
So I actually have a follow-up, but before I do that, I wanted to open it up to the audience as well because we just have a few minutes. So is there a question out there? Anyone? Can we get a microphone to him?
Go ahead. Hopefully we can hear you. There we go.
He's going to get this. Can you actually, yeah.
So one of the biggest factor that has been in discussion even in GDPR or the new DPDP Act is the fine and penalties for the data protection. So it lays down all the provisions for consent as well as on the data protection officer. As you said, it will be very difficult for a startup to have data protection officer and compliance, including consent, which may result into a fine and penalty, which our act says up to 250 crores under a single limit. So for a startup, it's a time when the guidelines come for the DPDP Act. It will be a very tough scenario if the fine and penalties are laid on the startup or the companies which don't have that much asset size to bear it. So what's your thoughts on it?
Yeah, it's a great question. So in my experience, and what I've seen in US and Europe, the startups are not getting fined. Where the big brands, Meta and Google are great examples. Sephora got fined and they had a settlement with the California Attorney General. The way this impacts startups, right, is if you are a startup building software for those types of companies to buy, they now require you to have a certain level of infrastructure and whatnot, right? So it's not so much that you need to be, you're at risk of being fined by the government. I don't know what the specifics are for DPDB, but in GDPR, there is a percentage of revenue, right? So if you only have $1 million is your revenue, then you'll only get fined some small percentage of that, right? But the way it impacts startups more is these big companies require startups now to have and maintain a certain level of sophistication when it comes to data collection, data processing, and privacy compliance.
As a cyber law, if you right now read it, as a cyber lawyer myself, so current framework doesn't define or distinguish a startup from a well-established company. We are waiting for the guidelines to come, but I think it should be a duty of the industry bodies like a TIE or a CIA to have a special provision in the guidelines for startup. Otherwise, it's actually you are at a mercy of a data board.
Yeah, again, I think the way GDPR does it at least is that it's percentage of revenue, right? And so it's not meant to be punitive. So if you have a lot of revenue, then yeah, that's at risk. So it ups the ante for you to be compliant.
And just to add one more thing, we think of GDPR as scary. It's not as scary. Having built a startup, it's huge, right? GDPR is huge. There are several articles. So you only have to comply per se with some of those articles. So if you dive deep into it, you will actually find out being GDPR compliant is not as scary and as tough as you would think. And great point around the percentage of revenue. So you are covered at least a little bit on that risk, but I think it's fairly straightforward and simple to be GDPR compliant. It's not as scary.
Just to adding to this, from the compliance side, if you see, Tally is helping businesses while it is coming in the banner of compliance and all. So maybe it is GST or maybe it is a TDS and anything. It is just a click of a button. You will be actually getting the reports in your hand, because accuracy, data accuracy, and also filing the returns on the timing is very, very important from both perspectives. So Tally is actually giving that empowerment to any businesses. You have to just look in your data. It will give you all filtration where you have to do the reconciliation. If something wrong in the transaction, you have to just actually go and address it and just file the return. It will save your time. It will save your penalties. It will save to grow actually. So that's, I think you wanted to add something.
Thank you.
No, other thing which you just said that startups should get exemptions. In my personal view, they should not, because you see, ultimately, if a startup leaks a data or a large enterprise leak a data, impact is same. That is one. And second, you see, if startups get those exemptions in the early formation years, and tomorrow they are going to become big, so that same mindset gets carried on. And that the end result is not good, as we have seen recently.
My only point was on the asset side, the ability to bear the fine. That was the only thing.
Yeah,
Definitely the infrastructure should be same because
correct.
the
Correct.
data, if a startup is handling a medical or a
Right.
financial data, it is a
Correct.
significant data fiduciary
Right.
under the act as
Right,
well.
right.
Yep, we have one more question, I think.
Okay, so I think we're almost out of time. So I have one last question to ask because we didn't, I think one of you mentioned about how to sort of build the trust with the customer as well. So maybe each one of you can talk about for your own organizations, because, you know, at least in our sector, we've seen big data breaches at big hotel companies, and, you know, the kind of reputational damage it carries with it can be huge and quite significant. So it'll be good to hear maybe 30 seconds each on what are you doing in your companies to help build that data trust. So for instance, I'm very curious, at Tally, you have everything that you need to know for a customer. How do you build that trust? How do you give that comfort that my data is secure?
Correct. So as I mentioned that it is based on the simplicity, you have to just focus on your business. So we have actually introduced audit trail in the application itself. If something happening around and every user is actually punching the data and a lot of outcome is coming out. So audit trail becomes very, very important because as far as compliance is concerned, as a business owner, I need to know that who is doing what in the data, and if something is getting deleted by any chance, that need to be also tracked out and why it has been done. So Tally is taking care of that so that we can just actually empower our businesses. That data breach should not happen. As I said that we also have to empower our customers and even to startups because it is on the go. You want data on the go to take the business decision. So actually data has to travel. So once data has to travel, you will be always in mind that somebody may come and may take my data or some bad thing happen to that. So as I mentioned earlier, it is in the encrypted form. It is a mirror image. It is traveling and actually you are going to get that data. Nobody else can access that data. So that is becoming very, very important, be it a small company or be it a big company. That is, I think, it is required.
Just one thing I would like to add is I would like to tell my customers, trust me, that we are building great code and shipping. They won't. So there are third parties that can actually help validate that. There are frameworks that are available. Obviously, they cost some money. So as a startup, make sure you keep that in mind when you're raising money so at least your VCs know for a fact that you're going to build a secure software by design and not after the fact. So keep that consideration in mind.
Yeah, and just one last point. You see, typically in any startup or any platform, when you develop or design, so there will be one lobby of SME analyst will say, I want these 4 attributes of a customer. Whereas on the other side, ML scientist will say, give me these 20 attributes so that I can give you better forecast. I think that's where you'll have to really draw a balance. Okay, what all to really capture. And whatever field you are capturing or storing, you need to have a very clear strategy that what impact it may have, it get leaked. So I think work at that level, and only then you can really build out a good strategy. That's what.
My advice is simple. Just be transparent with your constituents. What data are you collecting? Why are you collecting it? And what controls are you providing to the end consumer that they can use to control how their data is or not used by the business? And when data breaches occur, because they will occur, because the hackers and all the people who are trying to get access to your data, they are very, 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 very sophisticated. Data breaches will occur. Be very transparent about what happened and what you're doing to fix it.
All right, thank you, Vivek, and I want to thank all my co-panelists. I hope everybody found the insights quite useful because these are, as I mentioned in the opening, very, very important topics and can undo a lot of the good work that you guys are doing as you build your companies. I know most of these people are going to be available, so if there are any more questions, please reach out to them. Thank you.
Could we have a huge round of applause for our panelists? Could we also just request them to stay on stage, and could we have a token of appreciation to be given to all our panelists, please? Thank you so much. Could we request the panelists to just group up for a photo opportunity, please?